to defend their home. And as a result, the state governors were confronted with a major problem of how to deal with this enthusiasm, because the federal government, the Lincoln government, was constricted by a series of laws that, for example, you could have a militia out for 90 days to meet an emergency, but only 90 days. And so that, how do you capitalize on this enthusiasm to succeed with preserving the Union? This is the problem that every federal governor was faced with. Each governor took a different tack. Some of them will just keep sending people. You know, they've got volunteers, you can have them. But you'll find one a little different. This is Andrew Gregg Curtin of Pennsylvania. Mr. Curtin, thank you. Pardon me, I'm getting wired. There we are. But Andrew Curtin was governor of Pennsylvania, was confronted with a completely different approach to resolving this issue of enthusiasm. He knew that the Lincoln government had constraints on it. He established very early, of course, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania is relatively close to Washington, so he was already in contact with Lincoln and became very close with the president over the years. And what Governor Curtin decided to do is he turned to his legislature, and in 1 week, think of that today, he got the legislature to approve the maintenance and creation of a large division. It was ultimately called the Pennsylvania Reserves. And as a result, you had infantry units, a cavalry unit, a artillery unit, all in a single large command. And what Governor Curtin tried to do is just tell you, I have a side thing. He's from my wife's hometown, Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, and which is in Center County, right literally in the center of the state. And from that network, he was able to radiate throughout not only the Lincoln government, but within the state itself to get support for this scheme that he wanted to do. He happened to be in Washington at the time that Fort Sumter was fired upon. Consulted with Lincoln, said, whatever you need, call on us, and we'll try to support it. In the upshot of this, he returned to Harrisburg, and lo and behold, Thomas Leipert Kane, K-A-N-E, had already volunteered, so he's the first volunteer, and also he proposed that he could bring several companies with him from the northern part of the state. It's called the Wildcat District. If you've ever been up there, it's still the Wildcat District. It's a very empty part of Pennsylvania. If you've seen, say, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, it's a stark contrast, put it that way. But there is Kane in all his sartorial splendor. He will be a very ambitious man. I'd say a word about him is he was very romantic when it came to war, the best way I can show it. He saw it as kind of a source of glory, that there is a great sort of aura about being valorous. General Meade will say words to the effect later when Kane got into a real jam, I expected this of him. He was always hunting for glory. And so that as a result, you'll find that Kane can be a problem within the regiment, put it that way, because I tell you one thing, the American soldier, and I think all soldiers, are not foolish, and they know a dangerous commander. He is what my grandfather used to call a wild ass of the desert. And what he meant by this is a man who really had relatively more ambition than he had common sense. And so that you'll find a number of issues with it. Now, Kane proposed in raising these companies, it came out to be about 5 of them from the Wildcat District. They were going to rendezvous in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, because it's a great transportation nexus, river, road, rail, etc. And also the county fairgrounds, Dauphin County Fairgrounds, were available. They're a huge area, places for barracks, for training, and that sort of thing. So it was a major rendezvous point for the state was in this area. And then, while they were in Smethport, which is way up on the New York line, you can see where they came from. I outlined in red the various counties. And I'll explain the 3 outliers there in a moment. They happened to look out one morning from the regiment, the forming unit headquarters, and they saw a butcher who was carving up a deer. And several fellows sauntered over there and said, "We will use the bucktail as our symbol." And so I just picked this one so you can see 3 officers, all from different companies in what became the regiment, and they are sporting their bucktail. And so that will be a very important part of their regimental identity. And also you will find those from other counties that join the regiment will just adopt that and kind of become honorary lumberjacks as well as these fellows up there. Is the counties of origin. I don't know if you can see that in the back, but you've got Tioga. Perry is an outlier. It's further south. Cameron is a northern county. Warren is a northern county. Tioga is another. Carbon is a coal mining. And then Elk, which is a northern county. And then Chester is a very southern county in Pennsylvania. McCain and Clearfield are also lumberjack counties, but they'll be, the Clearfield will be a late addition. The reason for that was the federal government would not recognize the creation of a regiment until there were 10 companies. And so you had to, it turns out you had to cobble together other units so that you would have an adequate company, or battalion. Well, I call it a battalion, but it's actually their designation is regiment. But the other thing is it needs a commander. When the legislature created the reserve, it was Governor Curtin's ambition that it be an identifiable division. And he asked George McCall to come out of retirement to command it. McCall's an interesting person in his own sense. He served during the Second Seminole War and then also during the Mexican War, and was later an inspector general in the Army. And I was, for 3 years, I was the IG's historian, and so he became one of my men. And he did very good service, but he claimed ill health. There's something about, I suppose, if you're in New Mexico and you're breathing a lot of sand, it can affect you. And so he retired and was recalled for this duty. And he will do a very competent job until once again health gets in the way, and he has to resign. But Kane pushed to have his collection of companies somehow merged into this reserve division. And as a result, the Bucktails were formed with their snappy head cover, and under General, the general, I should say, they were incorporated into the regiment. Now, the commander of the regiment was a man named Charles Biddle. You can see, I just wanted to point out, Perry, Carbon, and Chester all came into the regiment because it had to be formed for the regimental construction. Charles Biddle was the colonel commanding, is everybody voted for Kane just because Kane had kind of organized them. And Kane showed a rare good sense in not accepting the colonelcy because he didn't know anything about things military. And as a result, Charles Biddle, who was a veteran of the war against the Seminoles also and against Mexico, was the colonel commanding, and you're going to see that's his, I call that's his friendly picture. He was a very hard man who at the same time really instilled discipline on these people. In a lot of it, these were lumberjacks, they're kind of independent men, they're used to operations without a lot of supervision. They needed somebody like him to be brought into it. Now, the first time the regiment is organized, it is dispatched to Cumberland, Maryland. Let's see if I can, there's one thing, which was the top one, thank you very much. Cumberland, Maryland, up here. And you'll see this is the New Creek Romney Triangle where it will operate. And again, the soldiers, they say, are not dumb. They observe Colonel Kane, who kept pressing Biddle to do more stuff, to get engaged, and to, how to put it, just to become more aggressive. And Biddle was under very tight orders from the governor because these were state troops. Don't cross the state line until there's a compelling reason to do so. And Kane just didn't understand that. And as they say, the soldiers began to recognize this fact, that this was an impetuous person who can cause them a great deal of harm if he doesn't come under control. And so that you'll find Kane will, let's see, go back for one. There we go. Kane will persuade Biddle to allow him to go to New Creek, which is Kaiser now. It's interesting, I just want to mention, my daughter lives on Kaiser in Prince William County, but it's Kaiser in West Virginia. So I always marvel at the way we mispronounce things. But what happened was that Kane persuaded Biddle to let him go to New Creek, and then he realized that Confederates were off contending with First Manassas, and so as a result, he just sent patrols out as far as Romney. And then a huge force descended on Romney. It was A.P. Hill commanded a whole brigade, and Kane had to scoot back. This, let's say, chilled the relationship between Kane and Colonel Biddle, because Biddle pointed out that it was only good luck and Confederate mistakes that allowed Kane to get back from being beyond support. And so, again, I mention this because you can see the soldiers coming to a conclusion about how you don't want this man to be in command of this regiment, put it that way. Now, the operations will be fairly short in Cumberland, and they will be brought back to Harrisonburg. Harrisburg, I'm sorry. There's a Harrisonburg in Virginia, and I always get confused. But they'll be brought back, they'll be fully equipped, they'll be issued Springfields at the time with a promise that you will get your better Sharps rifles when they're available. And so that because one of the things, and the reason why some of these outlier companies joined this unit was the 13th Pennsylvania, the Bucktails, was designated the Rifle Regiment. And that was mesmerizing to many people. But the problem with that is that you were trained in light infantry tactics, which meant that every battle that the reserve division was engaged in, you would be the skirmishers. And so as a result, you'll find a very high attrition rate in this regiment throughout its existence. It will just be, you'll see by the end of the war, it's down to 300 out of well over 1,000. And this is part of it, is they went through the mill every single time that they could. But Kane's relation with Biddle also began to deteriorate. There's a lot of tension, and it was kind of resolved in one sense in that Biddle was elected to Congress. And so in December of 61, Biddle left for his new duties, and Kane fully expected that he would be elected colonel. That was one of the provisions that the governor had come up with, that you can elect your officers, your field officers. And so that when the election came, Kane will be very disappointed. Where are they now at this point? I just wanted to show you this. They're in Tennessee Town, which is in the District of Columbia, but you can see how small Washington was in those days. And the shaded area shows the wartime Washington. So it really is hardly anything. So it really was very rural. They're set up in Tennessee Town, and this thing came up at that point. Because the Bucktails had been moved so quickly to the Romney area, the Cumberland area, is that they had never been properly mustered. And so by this time, they weren't drawing any pay, because, bureaucrats don't like it. So a very sympathetic paymaster endorsed a blank payroll that said, mustered into service by order of the Secretary of War. And then he paid them. And they got away with this until it came time for what we call it the ETS, the end of their service, when someone said, you've never been mustered. And it took now the Army commander, General Meade, to make a kind of an edict that says that they can be discharged without any prejudice. And he backdated their entry to the time they went to Cumberland. So good for General Meade. But the battalion had a number of really very skillful officers. And you have one event here where they marched to Drainesville because there was a rumor that Jeb Stuart was making a raid. And the reason why they call this the I configuration is you had one thing, and the Confederates were trying to rise right up one line. Bucktails are in this area, so they're in the center of the action. They form the skirmish line first time, and they're beginning to learn the lesson. And it's a success that Stuart is chased away. He doesn't get to do the forage that he was looking for. Now, you figure this is after Ball's Bluff and First Bull Run. This is a federal success of some sort, and so it makes a great deal more hoorah, if you will, than is justifiable by our standards today. It's a very small skirmish. But what I did find interesting is that the brigade commanders at this time are George Meade, Edward Ord, and John Reynolds. Can you name three better brigadier generals? And as a result, this becomes an extremely well-trained unit that's increasingly effective. Now, Kane thought with Biddle gone, the boys will elect me. Didn't work out. He lost the election to my relative, Hugh McNeil. This is my ancestor. Hugh McNeil had started, he's from Oswego, which is just on the Lake Ontario. He made Auburn, New York, my family's hometown, his home. And then he studied under William Seward for the law. So Seward was his mentor. And he found himself, for health reasons, in the Pennsylvania area. He was running the what's called the Bank of Warren. so he'd be a bank manager, I guess you'd call him, as an interim. And he joined a company that became one of the Bucktail units. Kane was extremely disappointed, as you can imagine, at not getting what he thought he was qualified for. He wasn't, I don't think he was qualified. You'll see another thing he's involved in. Let's say he was a man with a surfeit of ambition. And also, he was too much initiative at a time when common sense should have prevailed a little more. But shortly after the election, Kane took leave. You know, he's trying to sort things out. And while he was on leave, he wrote a skirmish manual. He called it that, skirmish manual. And to train troops in skirmish tactics. When he came back to the regiment, he asked permission of General McClellan at all. You know, so he went right to the top. That's another thing. He had no sense of protocol, you know, who you should go to. But at the same time, he said, I'd like to try this. And so he selected the companies that most voted for him to be his experiment. So there were 4 companies. And he then asked for combat. I want to test this under combat conditions. And as it turned out that McDowell's Corps was being moved by the Lincoln government to the valley to try and confront Stonewall Jackson. And as a result, he was sent with these 4 companies to experiment. They moved to Front Royal. They got to Strasburg, where Stonewall Jackson was pulling through, and they concluded that this is more than we can handle. And so they pulled to the east of Front Royal, and Jackson was able to get through. So you remember you had Fremont coming from one way, McDowell was coming from the other. The upshot was that they were detached with the cavalry to lead John Fremont's forces on the west side of Massanutten Mountain, and McDowell will go on the other side. The upshot of that was that the force, if you will, pressed the Confederates southward all the way to Harrisonburg. It took a couple of days. The upshot of that was that the 1st New Jersey Cavalry, under that great Englishman, Sir Percy Wyndham, opted to follow Jackson, who was withdrawing towards Cross Keys. And about 3 miles east of Harrisonburg, Wyndham encountered disaster. It was they call it an ambush. It was set up by Turner Ashby, and Wyndham was hit. He was captured. The regimental colors were captured, and a number of other people were also involved. And as a result, Kane asked his friend George Bayard, who was commanding Bayard's flying column, I want to go and rescue him, get him, save him. And so Bayard very reluctantly said, fine, let's give it a shot. And he got into these woods. There's a little monument there, it's fenced in. It's perhaps 2 miles from east of Harrisonburg. He got into a heck of a fight. Now, by this time, all of Kane's people were armed with Sharps rifles. They could really bring some fire down. And as a result, the Confederates thought they were dealing with a much, much larger unit than they had actually encountered. But it was still overwhelming. You're talking about 2 full Confederate regiments are attacking towards the roughly 105 men that Kane had. Kane is hit in both the leg and the chest. He withdraws, has to collapse. Colonel Charles Taylor, who is, or I should say Captain Charles Taylor at that time, who was a future regimental commander, tried to save Kane. He is bagged too, captured, and the Bucktails withdraw. They're down to about 80 people at this point. So Kane started with almost 200. It shows you that, again, soldiers recognize this is an impetuous man who's going to get us in more and more trouble as things go on. So the remnant of the regiment will support an artillery battery at Cross Keys, do very well, and then they will get the word, you're going to be the headquarters guard for the new 3rd Corps, which was McDowell's Corps, which had become a department, which became a corps again, and so that you can go and lick your wounds and recover a little bit. So just one thing I wanted to show you. This was commissioned by Bradley Johnson, who was a Confederate officer. It's kind of a romantic version showing the death of Ashby. And he hoped that it would raise money for his regiment. This was several years after the war. It didn't make any money. I guess people just weren't in the mood for gory scenes of one sort or another. But if you ever see this, think Bradley Johnson and Harrisonburg. Now, one of the things that occurred at the Harrisonburg fight was Colonel Ashby was killed. In my part of Virginia, where I live, the 6th of June is Confederate Memorial Day, and it's because of the death of Ashby. There used to be, when I first came there in the 1990s, there's all the school children, they have a procession up to the graveyard where Ashby was buried. This has withered away. It's no longer done. I don't quite know if a decision was made or people just lost interest. I don't know. Now, the other part of the regiment was involved on the Peninsula. And I just will give you a litany of places where they were engaged. Colonel McNeil contracted typhoid fever, and so he stayed in Fredericksburg when the regiment deployed. And you'll find that they are attached to Porter's 5th Corps when they got down to the Peninsula, and they're involved in a number of fights. And they withered away as a result of the engagements that they encountered. Let me just give you the list. First thing was Beaver Dam Creek. That was a terrible fight, and part of the poor staff work. 3 companies were left on the wrong side of Beaver Dam Creek, and the staff never recalled them. And so one of them wandered around and had to surrender. The other 2 were finally able to come back. But that began the tremendous attrition that the regiment experienced in the South. The next is Gainesville, and then Chickahominy Crossings. At that point, General Reynolds was captured briefly for a while, and then the next one is Fraser's Farm, where the regiment really got hammered. They were in the center position of 3 divisions, and the Confederates were coming right at them. And you got tremendous attrition with that. General McCall and one of the regimental commanders went forward to see what's going on, and he was captured. He'd gone up just a little bit beyond. And the officer came scurrying back and formed a line, at which point the nightfall had come along, and as a result, they broke contact and withdrew. They were in reserve at Malvern Hill. And then finally, they're back at Harrison's Landing, and Colonel McClain McNeil shows up, and his first utterance when they formed for him is, "My God, where are my bucktails?" Because they were down to about 380 people at that point. Now, as a result of exchange, people didn't know, what do you do with a prisoner of war? Pretty soon, they were back up to some strength, but they never were able to restore themselves to the full effect that they once had been. And you're beginning to see the gradual erosion of manpower. In part because the federal government would never allow them to go back to Harrisonburg to rebuild. It's just, we need manpower more. And so as a result, the McClellan's force just languished at Harrison's Landing. President Lincoln and Secretary Stanton recognized their lack of success in the Valley. What are we going to do now? And so that is when you get John Pope called from the West to create a new army, to preside over a new army, the Army of Virginia, which is going to hopefully be part of Lincoln's strategy to negate what's going on with the Confederates. The upshot of this is to bring the war, one, to hand the initiative to Robert E. Lee, who is now the commander of the Army of Northern Virginia, and then to shift the war away from Richmond up along the Rapidan and the Rappahannock rivers. And so as a result, you're going to get a completely new effort. And General Pope is very much on the defensive. The reason being, it's obvious, and you're going to hear me tomorrow talk about intelligence flow coming in, is to Lee, the minute people began to leave Harrison's Landing, and the drop was when Burnside's corps, which had come up from North Carolina, was still off Fort Monroe. And then it started to go up the Potomac. That was an indication that there's no more pressure going to be brought on Richmond itself. So therefore, he can shift to the Rapidan and the Rappahannock, and he can probably, he hopes, destroy Pope's army before the two components can be united. So that would be Lee's goal in doing this. The approach for the Federals was along the area you can see here. Here's the Rapidan, and then the Rappahannock. Rob and I were talking about how skillful Pope seemed to be at first in warding off the maneuvers of Lee along the Rapidan and the Rappahannock. Pope actually learned through a cavalry coup in which an adjutant was captured with all of Lee's orders about Lee's plan to try and get around him. And as a result, he pulled back north of the Rappahannock and very skillfully parried, if you will, Lee's local efforts to get across. And so I think this leads to Lee's decision that it's time to make some major moves. And so that is why you get the, this is Jackson's March, showing him, and Rob has talked about that already, moving to the Bristow Station and the Manassas area. It's the whole situation is altered by this. Meanwhile, as they say, what is Kane up to? Remember, he's the headquarters guard. And the headquarters guard is attacked by Stuart, and it's blinding rain. Colonel Kane has come back, he's been exchanged, he's still on crutches, and when Stuart split his force, one to go for the baggage train of Pope himself, and the other to go into the where the bridge is across the stream, and Kane, with it commendable initiative, counters this with a bayonet attack in the middle of the night. It's darker than it can be, it's raining, and as a result, the Confederates figured discretion was the better part of valor here. We better get out because we don't know how big this unit is. So it was just 68 men in a bayonet charge, cleared the area. But the rain, I will add, yes?
Sorry to interrupt you, I'm just a little bit confused, Joe. Are the Bucktails separated in two units? One at one.
No. Oh, they are at this point. Yes.
They're still separated.
You got Kane's battalion, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
It's 4 companies, and then now McNeil is back. Remember?
Right. Okay. Just trying to get.
And
thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
They will not be joined until after Second Manassas, and then they become a unit again after Second Manassas. So, sorry I didn't make that clear. They will be part of John Reynolds Division, and throughout this. So if you see any maps or anything that says Reynolds Division, you know that there are Bucktails in there, and they're always performing the screening operations for the division. There are other units that, of course, are called on to do this too, because the division can be a very large front. But every fight, you will find the Bucktails or skirmishers because they opted to become the rifle regiment. I'm sure many men at that point said this was a mistake, but it's too late now. That's the way it goes. The force, let's show. I showed this because somewhere on these maneuvers, Pope was very slow in reacting to the news of Stonewall Jackson getting at the Bristow station. But he then began to do all the right things. He sent the mass of his forces up to the Gainesville area, which meant that he had placed a large force between Lee's 2 wings. Then, of course, he had to find out. He thought it was a major raid of some sort at first. He didn't realize that all of Jackson was on his rear area. But he then had to send it up to clear it out up the railroad. And meanwhile, Jackson had left a force in the area of the railroad, and he'd gone on to sack Manassas Depot. In fact, well, I did have a picture of that, but it seems to have vaporized.
Sorry. I thought there was one as well.
That's right. But that's okay. Well, you can see the forces gathering. Now, what is happening here is Reynolds is coming up along the Warrenton Pike. He's, how to put it, they are alert to some kind of Confederate action, but they don't know where. And then you will have, in this area, let's see if I can go back. It's on the other talk. That's I have a Bronner's Farm draft schematic for you. So that, you know, when you get this old. But we'll go on with this. You can see what happens is Reynolds is coming up the Sudley Road, and he hears a heck of a fight going on. And that, of course, is the Bronner's Farm engagement. And once he got he's behind Sigel's force, and he rides over to find out what the action is, and describes to King that he's close by, and then I'll come over and help you in the morning. But in the meantime, what's happened is McDowell has been told to go to Manassas, and he, on his own hook, he left Ricketts' division to try to block the Thoroughfare Gap. But you know, one division against an entire corps is not very good odds. And then the other thing was that King was an epileptic. And I tell you, this is an interesting thing, is McDowell knew this, but he didn't want to fire his old friend. And as a result, King, I think, had a seizure in the course of the engagement at Bronner's Farm. And the lesson learned here is you've got to be hard with your subordinates. You just cannot let this sort of personal sort of justification get into dealing with a realistic problem. He had done a kind gesture that will come back and haunt them, put it that way. And so that King is out of the picture. He's worried about it. Ricketts is worried about it. And so they have no guidance because it was mentioned earlier, Rob mentioned that McDowell got lost in the woods. And so as a result, what do? Well, you get out of there. And so you have both the units moving either to Manassas or to Catlett's to just avoid it. So that the last force between Longstreet and Jackson and the Federals, for that matter, has been pulled out of the way. So when Reynolds moved over the next day, he found that there's nobody there, and then he gets orders from McDowell, cooperate with Sigel. Now Sigel had been told to advance into the area, confront Jackson, and take him on, pin him down, because we have him in the bag. And it's a phrase that Pope said several times, a bit optimistic. And as a result, the force was, how to put it, just not coordinated very well. It's the best way I can put it. If you think of it, you have these three corps. Fremont's has come in and Sigel's taken that over. We've got McDowell. None of them have been working with each other. And so the best way I can describe it is like, in the old phrase, is a bulky team. In other words, they're trying, but they're just not working very well with each other. And you'll find throughout this phase, there is some very weak staff work. It's the best way I can provide it. And the reason is that they just have not coordinated with each other for a very long time at all. Now, you can see it's forming. Jackson is up here. Here's Reynolds coming in. As Colonel McNeil is in command, still just the 6 companies are managing it. The first mission for Reynolds is to find out where the flank is. And you'll find that they moved down past Groveton, almost to the Bronner Farm, and somewhere in this area, if you're there, ever go there. And they really run into a buzzsaw. Tremendous artillery fire is being brought down on them. And as a result, the Bucktails will come to a halt. They have to. And then General Meade will discover that General Schurz, who is just to his north, is in serious trouble. That's the other thing I'll find is that with Schurz, he forgot one of his brigades. Is the artillery commander, Cooper, with Meade's division, will be, or brigade rather, will be out wandering around to withdraw one of his batteries so it can replenish its ammunition, and he'll stumble across a brigade from the Schurz's division. What are you doing? So they have to sort it out. The effect was that Jackson's people were able to actually drive a wedge into the federal line at that point. And Meade will just say, this is not good, and so he pulled back even further to about the Groveton area, which is just in this area here. And then you'll find that the forces still uncoordinated, not working well together. On the, General Pope will show up at about 1 o'clock, 1300 on the 29th, and he will be operating under the complete illusion that he's dealing with just Jackson. He never can break that fixation. And so everything that he does is premised on, we're gonna bag Jackson in that. And for some reason, he feels that, or felt that Longstreet was at least a day away as opposed to imminently arriving. He just, for some reason, never really connected with it. The, let's see if we get there. You can see this is again the 29th of August. Is what happens up here is Sigel was told, fix Jackson until we can show up and really pile on him. And so Sigel's interpreted that as, in essence, a series of piecemeal attacks all along the line. He never achieves mass. And as a result, some of the attacks are very promising. And yet the effect is that none of them can be successful because there's no follow-up at all. And so as a consequence, a lot of lives are lost up in here. You can see there's some close phenomenon, but nevertheless, nothing is done that can be banked on. Now, you can see here that going to the Bucktails, what they do is they pull back to near the Lewis house and just along the extension of Compton Road, south of the intersection with the Groveton Road. And they have to bivouac in that area. The reason being that the, pressure is already on from Longstreet. And Reynolds can see that. You can see that in this area here, he pulls back. This is the Reynolds in all of this area. And as a result, the force is just not going to be particularly effective for the rest of the day. This, by the way, credit is due, is from John Hennessy, did a major map study, oh gosh, in the late 80s of Second Manassas, and they're pretty good maps, although you can see that sometimes they don't fit in too well. Now, on the 30th, you can see that Longstreet is building, and the twice Lee had said to him, where's the effect? Why don't you attack? And he said, no, I'm not going to, and he gave good reasons. The third time, Lee asked him to do that. Longstreet knew better. He said, artillery will solve this. And so he moved artillery into the area of the Bronner's farm. And if you've ever been there, you'll see it's just a clear fire right down to the flank of the attacking Federals. It's just appalling what they were asked to do. The climax of this fight is along Chin Ridge. The operation came slowly unglued as it do the sequence. The first was Warren's little unit, the 5th and 10th New York, which were on ground just in this area. In this area. They are overwhelmed. There were just 2 regiments against all of Longstreet's people. And then that means that the Bucktails are going to be next, because they are on the next ridge over, Chin Ridge. And as a result, they are hit very hard. And then something very bizarre occurred. Reynolds had already told General Pope, there's something really big building on our flank down here. And so therefore, you've got to take precautions. Nobody seemed to react to this. And as a result, Longstreet was able to get closer and closer. The Bucktails reported that there was a lot of people out in front of them. General Reynolds said, you know, the whole behavior of this force is not of a retreating unit. They are building up for something. So he rode forward and almost got bagged. And so he rode back. He said people were shooting at him and so on. He decided he better personally tell Pope what is going on. And so he will eventually wind up at Buck Hill, where Pope has his command post, and reported what he'd seen. And Pope, one, questioned his veracity. And then when he got other reports that there is some kind of buildup on the south, he told John Buford, who was the cavalry commander, go out there and see what's going on, and then see if this officer's telling the truth. Needless to say, Reynolds left in a huff. And as a result, the build-up continued on that side. There's no question that they will do it. Now, when McDowell approached Reynolds, what he gave him directions to, first of all, build up. So you began to have some forces coming over. But some odd lapses occurred. Is, first of all, McDowell ultimately told Reynolds, come to the north of the road, the Warrenton Pike, and we will, you can get the stragglers from this disastrous attack that's occurring with Porter. And then 2 brigades were able to get across the road. And then the 3rd Brigade was commanded by a man named Martin Hardin. I'm building up, I just want to mention Hardin in some detail. Had to turn and fight, yet they were beyond support. The other 2 brigades couldn't come back because, one, they have this straggler control mission, and then also there's just a lot of people in that area. So as a result, Martin Hardin had to fight alone. You have a number of other brigades also made great sacrifice plays along Chin Ridge in attempting to delay, if you will, Longstreet's major attack. Now, Colonel Hardin, I just want to mention him because of his background. Let me get rid of this frog. He was a West Point class of 59, commendable, but he participated in the fighting at Yorktown, 7 days, Malvern Hill, Harrison's Landing. Okay. At Second Manassas, he was wounded not once but twice. Hit lightly and then really, really hit. After that, he served at various places, Bristow, Rappahannock, Mine Run, Catalyst Station. There he lost an arm. It was a guerrilla ambush, very unsporting. I mean, he was out checking his lines and bad things happened to him. Then he was at Gettysburg. He was at Falling Waters in the Confederate retreat from Gettysburg. He was at Spotsylvania. At North Anna, he was wounded again. So that's the 4th wound. Then Totopotomy, Bethesda Church. Then he was called back for an easy job, and he happened to be in Washington when Jubal Early raided Fort Stevens. And so there he was again. He finally ended the war as the garrison commander north of the Potomac. I just like to mention that because this is a warrior, and just an amazing career that he was able to succeed with. He retired in 1890, and he was the last of his class of 1859 to survive. So I think that's just a remarkable achievement all in all. But the final line will be, see if we got it. You can see the line here, and we were talking earlier with Rob's talk about, what went on, why didn't they attack straight at, is one of the comments that I've mentioned was that you have the sensuous attraction of the battlefield, and it just lures you to places you weren't planning on going, just because there are places you can go. And so as a result, you'll find that the whole Confederate attack shifts this way. And it worked pretty well. Is David Strother, who was one of Pope's staff, found a Reynolds Division, or a truncated division, and said, get over there. And so he put them back from here to the Chin Ridge area. And Meade deployed the Bucktails on the northern side of the Henry Hill. The significance of that to me is that Meade knew the kind of firepower that the Bucktails could bring down. And as a result, it was the perfect place for them, because the Confederates seemed to be moving in the direction of the stone house at the junction of the Warrenton Pike. And as a result, they're going to walk into the unit that has the most firepower. And that certainly will be to their advantage. The fighting along the road was a bit tenuous at first. The Confederates really hit the Federal line, and General Reynolds sensed that, and he grabbed a regimental flag and rode up and down in front of his men. And I will mention too, is at the same time, the other units were kind of behaving rather foolishly in pulling back and not adjusting. And as a result, the whole force seemed to be disintegrating. And so it really was the Bucktails that kept it together. Then the regulars were lined up, Buchanan's force, and as a result, it was stabilized. One thing is always very disconcerting is Robert Milroy, who was a brigade commander. Milroy's brigade was the first one on that line, was acting hysterical. He was riding around, waving and shouting and screaming. Very odd behavior. Let's say less than inspiring. But it was just an odd thing. But to say the Bucktails prevailed, and you had this last-ditch resistance, and then things will sort out. As you know, they had to withdraw, and here's where Colonel Kane appears again. He's the headquarters guard, but he shows commendable initiative. He gathered a couple of artillery pieces, brought the small Bucktail battalion down to the stone bridge, and secured it. And then with McDowell's permission, he blew it up, making it, let's say, next to impossible for a follow-up to happen. So once again, Kane showed commendable initiative at some risk to his troops. There he is again. It shows you what a couple year combat will do to your physiognomy. And he went on to be a brigadier general and with a command in the 12th Corps. And so that the good news is he's gone. And so the Bucktails can settle down a little bit. The force will move on after bivouacking in the Washington area. They joined the Antietam campaign. And the first place you'll see the Bucktails will be involved with the, up here you can see, well, Meade's people. Is the combination of firepower and Bucktail aggressiveness blew D.H. Hill's men off that ridge. And then they will stop there, bivouac for the night, police the battlefield. They get most of the POWs they got were wounded. Evacuate them, and then they will move on to south of Boonesboro, Maryland. where they will bivouac again and wait for the word. General McClellan, as you know, had this very serendipitous opportunity with the captured orders, so he knew what Lee was up to, yet he still moved with glacial caution, let's put it that way. And as a result, he missed a great opportunity. And then, by the way he deployed, his plan was that you'd get Hooker would come one way and Burnside would come another, and then his reserve would go smashing through. Well, it didn't work out that way. When Hooker was deployed at Keedysville, Maryland, he crossed an unguarded bridge and then advanced very carefully forward. A couple of things. He didn't have maps, which I find astonishing, but this is another intel lapse. There were no maps available for that region, and so he's ultra cautious. Jay Luvas, who is a good friend of mine, long gone now, said that if Hooker had gone to the Hagerstown Road, or even to where Stewart was, they'd have turned back, they'd have won it. But they didn't. He stopped, and then he turned, and I'm building to this, he then came down the Smoketown Road. And as they advanced, they began to run into their old nemesis, which was Hood's Texas Division. And as a result, they were delayed. Colonel McNeil had 4 of his companies out. Then he called up all 10 of them, and they advanced slowly southward on the road here. They'll be stopped by tremendous fire from Hood's people, and then McNeil will direct them to advance by leaps and bounds, rushes and very modern sort of approach. This is the rifle training. And then they will once again be stopped. And then McNeil, I guess I call this the pressures of leadership. McNeil will stand up with all this letters flying around and say, "Forward, Bucktails, forward!" And then a bullet will hit him in the heart. He's gone. And by the time he drops, he's finished. Bucktails will storm into the East Woods, and then you'll see they are repulsed as they come out of there. But that is the end of my ancestor's career in the battle. I'll just summarize it. That's a family portrait we have of him. Obviously, the commander's portrait, I think, is on that. It was done by a man with a good Scots name of Lachlan Field. So McNeil is gone. He's buried in my family plot up in Auburn, New York, along with many other less distinguished people. Now, as luck would have it, Colonel Taylor or the future Colonel Taylor was just exchanged. And generally speaking, he was the one that people wanted to take command. And so there are elections for Charles Taylor. It's a long, protracted thing. There's an administrative problem. The federal government had given up on this election stuff because they were not surfacing the right talent. But at the same time, Governor Curtin had said they can elect their field grade officers because that's the way that was the contract. And so the ice will be broken, if you will, when the troops themselves petition the governor to let this man become their colonel. He's still technically a captain through Fredericksburg when they finally sorted it all out. And then he is given a backdated commission to the time that McNeil was killed. So that I suppose, as far as the paymaster is concerned, it was okay on that. So the Bucktails were in, just to give you a quick summary of where they were. So Colonel Taylor is in command, even though he's still a captain, until after Fredericksburg. They're at Fredericksburg. You can see the Bucktails are up in this area. There's a new brigade commander, Colonel McCandless, told them, guard those artillery pieces. Meade came along and said, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I'm guarding the artillery pieces. No, you're not. Get in line. And so the Bucktails came up in line, and you can see it's an odd configuration just because of the Confederate deployment. And then, as you know, Meade attacked, made a division-sized attack with no support, and the inevitable occurred. Eventually, he was forced back. And so as a result, the Bucktails will have tremendous attrition. Another probably 150 men are done in. Go on, the next is with Taylor fully in charge, is they attacked, or they were in Gettysburg. The sequence was they were just about Unionville, Maryland, when they learned that their old commander, Meade, had taken command of the entire Lasham. And Meade will place them up in this area first. And then this is Caldwell's brigade, Caldwell's division. And then because of Sickles taking the ground, they will be rushed down to help defend Little Round Top. And in the fighting there, they will come under fire from Devil's Den. So they're down in the Plum Run Valleyette, if you will, and then Devil's Den. So they had to reconfigure and attack, I guess that's southward. And at that point, Colonel Taylor is killed. And again, he's just very aggressive, and he said, we've got to break this deadlock. And he got into a very un-colonel-like mutual sniping with a Confederate sniper and his own, Sharp's rifle, and he paid the price. And so at that point, it will be a junior officer will command the regiment for the rest of the war, as a matter of fact, the regimental nature. The Reserve Division, after Gettysburg, was assigned to the defenses of Washington because they were just so small. And then as a result, the command, if you will, of the division begins to disintegrate. The federal government, let's blame the feds, in essence, allowed Crawford to take 2 brigades up to Gettysburg. But the other brigade was held in Washington. Then it was dissolved. Governor Curtin protested. Major Hartshorn, who was the regimental commander at that time, protested to no avail. You're going to go because you're too small. And so as a result, the Reserve Division never saw full operations after this. They are garrisoned for the most part around Catlets, and then doing garrison-type duties, securing a railroad and so on. They are involved with things like the Mine Run campaign, briefly but very peripherally, because they're so small. But General Grant will take command, and as you know, Grant wanted all combatants to participate in this action that he had conceived for 1864. And so the Bucktails are committed. They will be in the overland campaign all the way down. They'll be quite actively involved in the wilderness. But after about the 3rd day, they're pulled out, and then they go down to Spotsylvania, where they secure a flank. They can actually hear the terrible fighting for the Mule Shoe, but they don't get involved because they're too small. I mean, they just can't be committed because the regiment is dealing with less than 300 people at this point. Then they will eventually wind up all the way in the south. You can see the position down here in around Cold Harbor. Now, I'll just show you they will wind up at Bethesda Church. You can visit it. There isn't much there. There's a new Bethesda Church, big Baptist whopper, which is about a mile from where the original site is. But Totopotomy Creek is to the north. Now, it shouldn't be a big surprise that the Bucktails, let's just say, were very flexible in maintaining their line. They had less than 2 days to go, so who wants to be the last man killed? But as a result, the Confederates will attack, and they will push back the federal forces, and the Bucktails will, they say, flexibly resist. And then finally, they're called off, and they withdraw on the 30th of May. It's their last day of combat. They will escort about 600 Confederate prisoners to the docks, and then we'll be going home. I'm just going to give you some statistics about what happened to that regiment. There were 471 men left on the rolls. Then 154 of them re-enlisted for the duration and were transferred to one of the new Bucktail regiments. I should have mentioned that Roy Stone was sent north to raise some extra Bucktails, and he came up with one, the 149th and 150th Pennsylvania, which in essence reinforced Meade later. But I will say at that point, there wasn't one veteran from the 1st Rifles who liked those people. And they never got along. They had separate reunions for that matter. It showed you how bad it got. But going on with that, so you had 471, 154 re-enlisted, 69 other men who had re-enlisted during the war, had an obligation they had to fulfill, and there were 44 fellows somewhere in the hospital. They had no idea where, but somewhere in the north in the hospital. A few of the officers lingered because they were promised higher commissions, and in fact, one of them, Roy Stone, wound up commanding a regiment, a very high number Pennsylvania regiment. And then the original members came back to Harrisburg. They had a very good dinner and a great parade. Governor Curtin gave a speech thanking them for the travail that they had undergone. And on the 13th of June, 1864, the last of the men were mustered out, drew their backpack, and they went home. Do you have any questions?